Welcome, beloved chosen ones. Be careful who you crucify, because they just might resurrect into the very answer to the prayer you haven't even prayed yet. They didn't just misjudge you, they prematurely buried you. But surprise. Surprise, you weren't dead. You were just planted. You were in seed form. Hidden, protected, and being prepared for a season they couldn't see coming. And now here you are, sprouting through the very dirt they thought would keep you down. And they're blinking in disbelief, whispering to themselves, "Wait, was that you all along?" Here's the suspense they'll never admit out loud. The same ones who rolled their eyes at your dreams, laughed at your silence, and whispered your name in mockery are now the ones who blush in your presence. They're the ones obsessively checking your stories, scanning your posts for hidden meanings, and fumbling their words whenever your name comes up in conversation. Why? Because what they once dismissed as ordinary was actually sacred. What they called boring was actually blessed. And what they thought was basic was actually beyond their comprehension. Psychologists tell us that first impressions are often wrong, not because of what we do, but because people project their own fears, insecurities, and chaos onto others. When they judged you quickly, they weren't seeing you at all. They were seeing the reflection of their own unresolved mess. And your calm was simply the mirror that exposed it. Now, they're trying to act brand new, like they never doubted you, never mocked you, never treated you like an afterthought. Isn't it funny how "not my type" can suddenly become "maybe we were meant to be" once God upgrades your entire existence? And let's not overlook the comedy in all this. The same people who once said you were too much are now secretly fantasizing about a life with you, rehearsing accidental run-ins, and scrolling through your photos, wondering how they let something so real slip through their fingers. But chosen one, this is bigger than attraction. This is about revelation. The curtain has been pulled back, and they're finally seeing who you are, who you've always been. And here's the beautiful irony. You didn't have to prove it to them, force it on them, or argue your way into their respect. Time did all the talking for you. Before we unpack why they judged you too fast and why they're falling for you even faster, I want to pause and say thank you to every single person who's been part of this journey, especially those who've supported through Super Thanks. You're helping keep this message alive and reaching the people who need it most. And I mean this from my heart, whether you donate or not. I'm beyond grateful that you're here, showing up, listening, and walking this path with me. Your presence matters. So, here's your interactive moment. If your spirit's already feeling this word, type 777 inch the comments right now. That's our sign of divine alignment in this space. Let's lock in. Chosen ones, because what we're about to explore might just explain why some people can't stop watching you, even if they swore they never would. God's chosen ones, they regret judging you too fast. Now they're falling for you. Number 1, they judged the wrapping, but had no clue you were the inheritance itself. Chosen one. How many times have people looked at you and thought they had you figured out in the first 5 seconds? They sized you up by your shoes, your car, your home, the way you carry yourself, not realizing heaven's value system doesn't operate by human eyes. They treated you like a barcode to scan, not knowing their scanner was broken because it was never calibrated for kingdom currency. Have you noticed how quick people are to price what they can't understand? They thought they were reading you, but in reality, they weren't even qualified to appraise you. You didn't parade your blessings on social media, didn't wear your resume on your sleeve, didn't need to prove that you were called, and that confused them. In a noisy world where everyone is shouting, "Look at me," your silence felt threatening. Your humility was misread as lack. Your stillness was mistaken for weakness. But tell me, chosen one, since when does a diamond need to shout to be valuable? As Proverbs 31:25 declares, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. Your dignity was your armor, but they mistook it for emptiness. Think about it. Albert Einstein wore wrinkled suits and often forgot to comb his hair. Yet the world eventually learned his value wasn't in appearance, but in the genius God placed in his mind. The same with you. They looked at your wrapping and assumed you were common, not realizing you were an heir of something eternal. Romans 8:17 says, "Now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ." They walked past you thinking you were just another face in the crowd, not knowing you carried the very inheritance they needed. In a world addicted to branding, your authenticity was a foreign language. They didn't see flashy ambition, so they assumed there was no ambition. They didn't hear you broadcasting your plans, so they assumed there were no plans. But chosen one, you weren't trying to be seen, you were being preserved. It's the same way. J.K. Rowling was once a struggling single mother, scribbling stories in cafes, rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter changed the literary world forever. People who saw her then couldn't see what she carried, and those who see you now may still be blind to your true worth. They thought you were replaceable. They tested their theory by replacing you with others, only to find those substitutes couldn't carry what you carry. Just as when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple in 1985, the company thought they could replace him, only to realize years later that his vision was irreplaceable. They brought him back, and Apple transformed into one of the most valuable companies on earth. The replacements couldn't replicate your soul, your loyalty, your discernment, your peace. Why? Because, as 1 Samuel 16:7 reminds us, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. They were looking skin deep, but your value runs spirit deep. They overlooked you because you didn't scream potential, you embodied potential. You were a seed in the soil, not yet blooming where they could see, but rooted in promise, just like David tending sheep, unseen by his own family, yet chosen to be king. And now, they're watching you glow without begging for their validation, heal without plotting revenge, rise without announcing a comeback. It's unsettling them, isn't it? They're starting to replay every moment where they could have treated you better. The truth is, chosen one, your peace speaks louder than their noise. Your elevation is silent but undeniable. You remind me of Keanu Reeves, humble, private, never chasing the spotlight, yet universally respected because his character shines beyond the screen. Isaiah 60:1 says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." That light is what they misread as emptiness. That glow is what they mistook for ordinary, and now that the gift they ignored is no longer within reach, they're realizing it was never just wrapping. It was a treasure chest they left unopened. The hardest part for them now, they can't unsee it. They can't unknow what you carry. And in the quiet moments, they're wondering, how did I miss it? How did I let the one sent to bless me slip through my hands? Just as Psalm 1:18-22 declares, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." You, chosen one, have become the very thing they now need, but can no longer claim. So, when they come knocking again, will you open the door? Or will you remember that some people only recognize treasure after it's been buried beyond their reach? Number 2. Their ego misread your energy now. Their spirit is starving for it. Chosen one. Have you noticed how some people walk into a room with their ego leading the way, blinding them before their spirit even has a chance to see? That's what happened when they first met you. Their pride was their filter, and it distorted everything. They scanned your presence through a lens of superiority, mistaking your quiet strength for emptiness. They thought you were soft because you weren't trying to dominate the room. They assumed you had nothing to offer simply because you weren't performing for their applause. But tell me, since when does depth need a spotlight? Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." Your energy wasn't loud, it was layered, refined, and spiritual. They couldn't hear it because their own noise drowned it out. They were too used to people who scramble for approval, who try to prove their worth in every interaction. You didn't play by those rules, and that, chosen one, rattled them in ways they didn't even realize at the time. Your calm disrupted their chaos. Your silence forced them to face themselves. This is the same kind of disruption that Mahatma Gandhi carried, a man who could bring empires to their knees without raising his voice. Simply by refusing to match the energy of violence and pride, you had that same quiet, unwavering gravity, and instead of leaning in to understand it, they turned away, thinking it meant you lacked power. They expected you to compete, to chase, to over-explain yourself. But Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, "In quietness and trust is your strength." You didn't feel the need to convince them of your worth. You didn't enter their game. You stayed in your assignment. That made their ego miscalculate your identity. They thought they could put you in a box, but they didn't realize you were the whole treasure chest. Now, everything has flipped. The same stillness they once dismissed as weakness is now the peace they can't find anywhere else. Look at Princess Diana. Many underestimated her because of her gentle demeanor, but it was that very compassion and poise that made her irreplaceable in the hearts of millions. Likewise, the depth they once overlooked in you is now the very thing they're craving, surrounded by shallow connections that drain instead of nourish. They're realizing what your presence truly was, living water in a desert. John 4:14 says, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." Chosen one, your presence carried that kind of sustenance, not just for the mind, but for the spirit. And now that it's gone, their soul feels the drought. They find themselves comparing everyone else to you, only to discover no one measures up, just as history shows us with Vincent van Gogh, dismissed and misunderstood while alive, only to be treasured beyond measure. After he was gone, they now see what they once ignored. They're angry now, not just at themselves, but at how blind their ego made them. They thought value came with noise, titles, or flashy displays. They were watching for fireworks and missed the sunrise. Eclesiastes 9:17 says, "The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools." Your wisdom wasn't packaged in performance, so they didn't recognize it. And now, that absence has become a haunting. Consider Bruce Lee, often underestimated for his size and soft-spoken demeanor. Yet his mastery and inner discipline made him a legend. You, too, carried an energy that wasn't about overpowering people, but about elevating the space you were in. They didn't have the discernment to see it then, but their spirit feels the loss now, the scariest part for them. They know they can't fake their way back into your life. They showed you, by their own actions, how little they valued you the first time. And Matthew 7-6 warns us, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs." You learned that lesson, chosen one. Now, they're left with the ache of what they let slip away, an ache their ego created. But their spirit now has to endure. So here's the truth. They can't escape. They had the real thing, and they let it go. And no matter how many voices surround them now, none will carry the quiet, steady, God-given weight of yours. Number 3, they mistook your healing for hiding. Chosen one. Have you noticed how quickly people assume the worst when they don't understand your process? They saw you step back, and their minds rushed to judgment. They thought your silence meant you were running away from life, from people, from responsibility. They whispered that you were too insecure to speak, too unsure to show up, too broken to belong. But was that the truth? Or was it simply the story they told themselves because they had never tasted the courage it takes to stop performing for the world and start repairing your soul? You weren't hiding, you were healing. And there's a difference the world rarely respects. Psalm 147:3 declares, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." That's what was happening behind closed doors, while they were out posting highlight reels, chasing approval, and performing for applause. You were in a sacred space they couldn't recognize. You were tending to wounds they didn't even know existed. Consider Adele. After her first massive wave of fame, she disappeared from the public eye for years. Many assumed she was fading away, losing relevance, but she was healing, recalibrating, finding her voice again, and when she returned, she came back stronger, breaking records all over again. You had your own version of that. People mistook your absence for weakness, not realizing it was the silence of someone rebuilding with purpose while they were trying to go viral. You were trying to get right with yourself and with God. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." You were renewing your strength in the secret place. Even when no one clapped for you, they judged you for not being loud, for not showing up everywhere, for not constantly proving your worth. But they didn't know you were busy dismantling the lies that had been planted in your spirit. Think of Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, out of the public view, mocked and underestimated by those who assumed his silence meant defeat. But when he emerged, he carried a moral authority that changed a nation. Chosen one. That's the kind of shift that happens when healing is your mission. They thought you were retreating, but you were fortifying. You were resetting your soul, realigning your purpose, and weathering private storms they could never survive for even a day. Matthew 6:6 reminds us, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Your unseen season was not a void, it was an investment. And now, here you are, showing up with a clarity that cuts through confusion, standing with a calm that rattles those who remember you in survival mode, speaking with a confidence that can't be shaken. They're watching you now, and it's unsettling them. Why? Because the person they once dismissed as fragile is now unmovable. The one they thought was hiding is now glowing. Look at Robert Downey Jr., written off as finished after addiction and scandal, yet returning as one of Hollywood's most bankable stars through discipline, healing, and transformation. Just like that. The value was always there. The problem was never you. It was their inability to see it. Yksi Peter viisi, 10 promises. And the God of all grace will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. You didn't suddenly become valuable. You've always been valuable. They just didn't have the vision to see it. Now, they're falling for you, not because you've become someone else, but because they've finally slowed down enough to see you. Yet what stings them most is the realization that they didn't give you grace while you were growing. They had the chance to support you when you were in the trenches, but instead, they counted you out. It's like the story of Michael Jordan being cut from his high school basketball team, overlooked in his formative stage, only for the world to later witness his unmatched greatness. And here's the truth. Chosen one, this version of you isn't rushing to be understood anymore. You're not auditioning for acceptance. Philippians 6 says, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion." You're living proof that the work God started in you has not only continued, but flourished. You've stopped seeking validation from the same people who dismissed your process, because you now understand that their approval was never the source of your worth. They mistook your healing for hiding, and now they're stuck on the outside, watching you live in a peace they can't buy, a confidence they can't copy, and a strength they can't fake. You've become the evidence that disappearing for a season doesn't mean you've been diminished. It means you were gathering the power to return unshakable. Number 4. They thought you were a story to gossip about, not realizing you were a scroll sealed by heaven. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how quickly some people turn your name into casual entertainment? They thought you were just a passing headline, a juicy bit of gossip to keep their idle conversations alive. They passed your name around like spare change, as if it had no weight. They added extra details to make the story more interesting, twisted facts until your truth was unrecognizable, and turned your pain into punchlines to feed their boredom. They spoke about you with such misplaced confidence, as if they had read the entire book of your life from start to finish. But here's the reality. They were skimming fiction, not truth. You were never just a story. You were a scroll, and not just any scroll, but one sealed by the very hand of heaven. Revelation 5:1 says, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals." That's you written on all sides, layered with depth, protected until the appointed time. They could gossip all day, but they never had the spiritual clearance to access the truth. Think about it. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks were filled with codes, sketches, and secrets that people couldn't fully interpret for centuries. His genius was hidden in plain sight, locked in symbols and languages others weren't ready to understand. In the same way, your life was encoded with divine meanings they couldn't decipher. You had layers upon layers, prophetic timing, hidden assignments, and spiritual authority that no amount of rumor could erase. They couldn't understand why you moved the way you did, why you pulled back when others pushed forward, why you chose solitude over the spotlight, why you were selective with your words and your presence. Instead of admitting they didn't understand, they filled in the blanks with their own ignorance. They made conclusions out of confusion. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your mystery meant mess. They thought being different meant being broken. But Isaiah 55:8 reminds us, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And oh, while they tried to define you, God was refining you. Think about Malala Yousafzai. The world saw her as just another girl in a small town until her story unfolded and revealed a world-changing purpose. Many underestimated her because they couldn't see the layers beneath her silence. That's what's happening with you now. The truth is starting to unfold in plain sight, and it is confronting them in ways they cannot deny. The lies they told about you are collapsing under the weight of the fruit you are producing. Matthew 7:16 says, "By their fruit you will recognize them." Every slanderous word is being silenced by the undeniable evidence of who you have become: strong, clear, whole, and called. The same mouths that once spread lies are now being forced to chew on their own words. Your life isn't just disproving their narrative, it's making their narrative look foolish. Look at Michael Jordan's flu game in the 1997 NBA Finals. Many doubted his ability to deliver under pressure, but he proved that even weakened, his greatness was untouchable. Likewise, your resilience is silencing every false prediction. The layers of your life, your depth, your strength, your calling, your authority are peeling back one by one, revealing things they never saw coming. Now they're in a strange position. The very person they once tried to bury with gossip is the person they can't stop watching. They're drawn to you, fascinated by you, even inspired by you, though they'd never admit it out loud. It's the same irony we see with Vincent van Gogh, dismissed and mocked in life, yet now celebrated as a genius whose work touches the soul. And this terrifies them, because if the truth about you is this different from what they believed, then what does that say about their own judgment? What does it reveal about the condition of their own spirit? Proverbs 18:13 warns, "To answer before listening, that is folly and shame." They answered about you without ever listening, and now the shame of that is creeping in. You were not made for quick reads or shallow conversations. You were written by the author of life, encrypted with a purpose, and sealed until the moment God said, "Now," just as the Dead Sea Scrolls remained hidden for nearly 2,000 years until the right time. Your truth was kept in divine storage until this very season. Habakkuk 2:3 declares, "For the revelation awaits an appointed time, though it linger. Wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." Oh, chosen one, the appointed time has come. The scroll is opening, and your truth is not just being revealed, it's being felt. It's in your presence, in your words, in your walk. The same ones who thought they could tell your story are now realizing they were never the narrator, they were just the background noise. And the more the scroll unfolds, the more undeniable it becomes. You were never theirs to define. Number 5. They didn't fall in love with you. They fell into conviction standing next to you. Chosen one. Do you realize how many people mistake conviction for love? They're telling themselves they fell for you. But that's not the truth. What they felt wasn't romantic butterflies, it was the sudden, undeniable weight of being confronted by a life lived in truth. Your presence pulled on their conscience in ways they weren't prepared for. You didn't shame them. You didn't point fingers. You didn't even speak on their flaws. But the way you carried yourself with peace, integrity, and alignment made their chaos impossible to ignore. It wasn't your smile that made them restless. It was your stillness. It wasn't your charm that kept them awake at night. It was the way your integrity exposed every game they'd been playing, John 3:20 says, "Everyone who does evil hates the light, and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." You are that light in their life, and instead of softening them, it unsettled them. They thought they were comfortable in their patterns, but being near you made those patterns feel toxic. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. His very presence in certain rooms made oppressors feel uncomfortable, not because he threatened them physically, but because his moral authority stripped away the lies they told themselves about justice and equality. You carry that same disruptive truth just by being who you are. You became a mirror they didn't ask for, yet couldn't turn away from. Every lie they had rehearsed about being a good person began to crack around you. Every manipulative habit, every carefully hidden insecurity, every fake persona began to feel heavy in your presence. Your healing journey was a spotlight on the places they refused to visit in themselves. Hebrews 4:12 reminds us, "For the word of God is alive and active. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart." That judgment wasn't coming from your lips. It was flowing from the spirit you carry. Now, they're mistaking that pull for love. But chosen one, it's not love, at least. Not yet. It's conviction. It's the ache of realizing they're not living right. That they've hurt people, including you. That they've been wearing masks for far too long. It's like what happened to Malcolm X during his pilgrimage to Mecca. The journey shattered old perceptions and forced him to confront truths he'd never considered before. Conviction often feels like transformation, but it's only the first step. They're drawn to you because your light reminds them of the person they could have been if they'd made different choices. Your strength is a reminder of the power they once had but surrendered chasing approval. Your clean spirit irritates every unhealed part of them, the same way an open wound stings when antiseptic is applied. They can't stop thinking about you, not because they're ready to love, but because you've awakened them to a reality they've avoided. Ephesians 5:13 says, "But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light." End quote. Think of Maya Angelou. People were drawn to her, sometimes without knowing why. It wasn't merely her words, but the spirit behind them that convicted people to reflect on their own lives. You've become that kind of presence to them. And here's the truth. The attraction they feel comes with responsibility. If they want access to you, they can't simply admire you. They can't just romanticize your peace while clinging to their chaos. They must change, repent, and face the very truths your presence has been exposing. That's where most people fail. It's easier to call it love than to admit, "Being around you showed me how much I need to grow." It's easier to create a romantic fantasy than to confront the uncomfortable work of self-examination. Even in history, we've seen this dynamic, like when people idolized figures such as Mother Teresa, praising her kindness while ignoring the fact that her life's work was a direct challenge to their selfishness. 2 Corinthians 7:10 tells us, "Godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation and leaves no regret. But worldly sorrow brings death." They're feeling the first pangs of godly sorrow, but without repentance, it will never become love. And deep down, they know they didn't truly fall in love. They fell into truth, and truth, for them, is the most uncomfortable attraction they've ever felt. So now the question is, will they embrace the responsibility that comes with being close to someone sealed by God? Or will they retreat back to the comfort of their illusions? Because, chosen one, your presence isn't meant to feed their fantasies. It's meant to call them higher, and not everyone is ready for that climb. Number 6. They realized too late that you were the answer to a prayer they laughed at. Chosen one. Have you noticed how some people laugh at what they don't understand only to later cry over the same thing? They laughed when you said you were working on yourself. They rolled their eyes when you drew boundaries. They whispered about you staying to yourself, praying more than you partied, and taking your healing seriously. In their mind, you were doing too much, being too deep, wasting your time on something invisible. But what they didn't realize is that while they were chasing noise, you were being prepared as the very answer to a prayer. They hadn't even learned to pray yet. They mocked your discipline because they couldn't comprehend it. Proverbs 13:18 says, "Whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored." They thought your structure was control. Your solitude was sadness. Your consistency was obsession. But they weren't there for the nights you cried into your pillow after wrestling with God. They didn't see the spiritual battles you fought in silence. They had no idea how close you came to giving up, yet you stayed faithful. Consider Serena Williams in her early training years while her peers were hanging out. She was on the court before sunrise. Many thought she was overdoing it, being too intense. Now the same discipline they mocked is celebrated as legendary. Your journey is no different. They dismissed it as overthinking or trying too hard. But in reality, you were in the refining fire. They didn't understand Zechariah 13:9, which says, "I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. They will call on my name, and I will answer them." You were being purified in ways the human eye couldn't measure. They saw stillness. Heaven saw preparation. They saw restriction. God saw alignment. Now life has flipped the script. Their world is cracking. Their perfect circles are falling apart. And they're scrambling for something real: peace, wisdom, guidance. Suddenly, your calm makes sense. Your boundaries make sense. Your habits make sense. Your strength makes sense. All the things they laughed at are now the things they're trying to imitate. It's like Steve Jobs being fired from Apple, only to be brought back years later when the company realized the very vision they once rejected was the only thing that could save them. The very person they once mocked is now the only one carrying what their soul aches for. They used to joke about your spiritual path, call you too deep, or say you were taking life too seriously. But then life hit them harder than they expected. All their surface-level fixes failed. Their friendships feel hollow. Their patterns keep breaking. And none of the people around them carry what you carry. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." That peace in you, the one they couldn't explain, is now the thing they crave most. It's like the story of Malala Yousafzai. In her early advocacy, many dismissed her as naive or too serious for her age. But when the crisis came, her voice became the one the world needed to hear. The one they rejected became the one with clarity, direction, and discernment. That's you now. They can't unsee it. They're watching your light enter rooms they thought you'd never reach. They're seeing your influence grow without compromise. And deep down, they can feel the truth. You weren't being dramatic, you were being obedient. 1 Samuel 15:22 says, "To obey is better than sacrifice." Your obedience set you apart, even when it cost you connection. You weren't isolating, you were being consecrated. Now the same version of you they dismissed is the version they desperately need. But it's not just about missing you. They missed the moment heaven was reaching for them through you. Imagine how Noah's neighbors must have laughed while he built the ark under clear skies, only to pound on the door when the rain came. That's the level of regret they're carrying now. They are left staring at the blessing they once mocked. wishing they had honored it when they had the chance. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap." If we do not give up, you didn't give up, and now your harvest is in full view. They're realizing too late that the prayer they're praying now was answered in you long ago, and that's a truth they can't escape. Number 7. They fell for the lie society told them, then collapsed into the truth. You became chosen one. Have you seen how deeply this world worships illusions? They bought into the lie that image is everything, that worth is measured by followers, designer labels, loud confidence, and surface-level success. From childhood, they were trained to scan for flash instead of substance, to listen to the loudest voice in the room rather than the wisest. So when you came along quiet, grounded, uninterested in clout, you didn't fit their definition of valuable. You didn't dress for their approval. You didn't speak the language of attention-seeking. You didn't perform for strangers or beg to be seen. And because they were blinded by a system that equates noise with importance, they overlooked you entirely. They were too busy chasing the trendiest faces, the most polished masks, the most performative personalities. But 1 Samuel 16:7 reminds us, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. They assumed that if you weren't playing the game, you had nothing to offer. What they didn't realize is that while they were hustling for applause, you were building something deeper. While they were curating highlight reels, you were cultivating roots. While they were selling an image, you were developing a legacy. Think of J.K. Rowling. She didn't fit the mold of a successful author when she wrote Harry Potter on scraps of paper in cafes as a struggling single mother. Yet, her quiet years of persistence birthed one of the most impactful book series in history. You were doing the same kind of work, growing in silence, becoming something real, not curated, not cosmetic, real. And now they're watching you rise. Not because you compromised or conformed, but because you stayed anchored in truth. John 8:32 says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." That truth you held onto is now setting you apart. You took the long road when shortcuts were tempting. You kept your integrity when selling out would have been easier. That's the same mindset that kept Nelson Mandela strong in prison for 27 years. The conviction that freedom without integrity is no freedom at all. And now the version of you that's emerging is shaking the very foundation of everything they thought mattered. Their systems are cracking. Their fake confidence is slipping. The idols they once chased are collapsing behind closed doors. The influences they worshipped are confessing burnout, scandal, or emptiness. And here you are, steady, focused, peaceful. Psalm 46:6 promises, He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. That's what they're seeing in you, the slow, undeniable glow of someone who built honestly. Your life is proving that the metrics they trusted were shallow all along. You are living evidence that true power doesn't scream, it moves in silence and arrives with substance. Think of Keanu Reeves, a global superstar who doesn't flaunt wealth or chase constant attention, yet is respected worldwide because of consistent humility and authenticity. They're not just drawn to you, they're crumbling under the truth you've become. Your presence alone exposes the parts of their lives that were built on lies. Your success without shortcuts is a mirror they never wanted to face. Matthew 7:24, -25, teaches that the wise build their house on the rock, so that when storms come, it stands. You built on rock, they built on sand. And now, the difference is obvious. If you could grow without validation, heal without a spotlight, and become without begging, then maybe, just maybe, they never really knew what success was. Muhammad Ali once said, "It's not bragging if you can back it up." But you didn't even need to brag, your life is the proof. They dismissed you because you refused to play society's game. Now they're watching you win by a completely different set of rules. Romans 12. De comment? Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's exactly what you did. And, deep down, they know your truth is real, while their version of worth was just a costume. And that costume, no matter how well tailored, is falling apart stitch by stitch. Number 8. They mocked the wilderness that built you, and now they're thirsty for your rivers. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how people laugh the loudest when they don't understand your process? They mocked the season that matured you because to them, it didn't look like success. You weren't loud. You weren't winning by their scoreboard. You weren't moving the way the world glorifies, chasing constant visibility, flaunting material proof, or keeping up the illusion of non-stop motion. So they decided, something must be wrong with you. Maybe you were lazy. Maybe you were failing. Maybe, they thought, your God had abandoned you. They whispered behind closed doors. They made jokes about your little faith journey. They treated your quiet obedience as weakness. They smirked at your apparent lack of progress. Some even asked outright, "Where is your God now?" But Deuteronomy 8:2 reminds us, remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart. The wilderness wasn't proof of God's absence, it was evidence of his investment. What they didn't see was that God was building you in silence. The wilderness was never a punishment, it was a process. It was the holy ground where everything fake had to die. Your ego, your addiction to applause, your need to perform for approval, your identity tied to outcomes. It was the place where God stripped away every counterfeit attachment so that when the blessing came, you wouldn't fold under pressure or become like those who only pretend to carry light. Think about Moses. 40 years in the desert wasn't a delay, it was preparation to lead a nation. Or Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years in prison, mocked and underestimated, but emerged with the moral authority to change South Africa in the same way. While they were laughing at your lack, you were in the sacred forge of transformation. It was brutal, lonely, confusing, but it was necessary. Isaiah 43:19 says, "See, I am doing a new thing, now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." You weren't just waiting for your blessing, God was preparing you to steward it with integrity, without selling out, without turning into them. Now the ones who mocked you are spiritually dehydrated. They are surrounded by shallow conversations, empty victories, and people who celebrate their masks but ignore their soul. They're exhausted because what looked like abundance was actually a desert in disguise. Think of Robin Williams, adored and celebrated publicly, yet privately battling a desert of the soul. That's the reality for many who mocked you. Their outer life shines, but their inner life is barren. The very people who laughed at your process are now sitting in the middle of their own dry land, thirsty for something deeper, realer, living. And here you are, not just surviving, but overflowing. You carry peace that doesn't need permission, clarity that doesn't need clout, and a glow that wasn't bought with products but earned through pressure. John 7:38 says, "Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them." Chosen one. That's you now, a living well, carved out by trials and faithfulness. Your rivers hold wisdom, presence, discernment, healing. You can't buy that in a marketplace or fake it with branding. Oprah Winfrey was once told she was unfit for television, yet her years of being overlooked became the soil for the depth and empathy that later defined her influence. You, too, had to go through obscurity to gain what cannot be imitated. Now they feel it, the pull, the thirst, the quiet longing for something beyond the aesthetic lives they've built. They're realizing the wilderness didn't break you, it rooted you. It gave you stability the storm can't shake. It gave you patience to outlast the noise. It gave you authenticity in a world allergic to it. And now, as your rivers begin to flow, they're parched in places they didn't even know were dry. The same ones who laughed when you were being refined are now hoping to drink from what they once disrespected. But here's the truth. Rivers like yours aren't found in shortcuts. They aren't created through attention-seeking or networking. They are dug deep in silence. And they only flow after a soul has been through something real. Psalm 1-3 describes you perfectly. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whatever they do prospers. Now they face a choice. Will they humble themselves and seek the source you've been drinking from all along, or will they keep chasing mirages while their spirit stays thirsty? Either way, chosen one, your rivers will keep flowing, not to prove them wrong, but to prove that God was right to trust you with the wilderness. Number 9, they fell for the counterfeit, and now they're haunted by your authenticity. Chosen one. Isn't it something how people will choose what glitters over what's genuine, and then spend the rest of their lives haunted by what they gave up? They had a choice. They could have chosen depth, truth, and transformation. Instead, they picked the show, the noise, the performance. They were drawn to what sparkled on the surface, without asking if there was anything real beneath it. Louder voices thrilled them. Flashier lifestyles dazzled them. Faster talkers made them feel like they were in the right company. And when you arrived calm, steady, rooted, and real, they overlooked you. They mistook your authenticity for simplicity. They couldn't recognize sacred when their taste was trained for synthetic. Jeremiah 9:11 says, "Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls." They saw that good way standing in front of them and walked the other direction. They chose the counterfeit because it was easier to digest. No challenge, no mirrors, just surface-level connection dressed up as realness. At first, it felt good. It felt validating. The counterfeit came with drama disguised as passion, manipulation disguised as love, chaos disguised as excitement. That's how the enemy packages destruction attractive, thrilling, and empty. Think of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Polished image, big promises, a captivating presence, yet beneath it all, nothing but deception. The same happened here. When the mask slipped, all that remained was emptiness. Now they're haunted not just by their mistake, but by your absence, by the presence they walked away from, your presence. Chosen one, the one they couldn't define but couldn't forget, the one that didn't need to perform. The one that made them feel seen without selling them something. Proverbs 12:19 says, "Truthful lips endure forever." But a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Your authenticity carried an eternal quality. And that doesn't leave a person's spirit quietly. It lingers. It echoes. It confronts them at the most unexpected moments, when they're with people who talk too much but say nothing, when they're with someone who checks every box yet feels spiritually hollow. They're realizing that your calm wasn't emptiness, it was stability. Your slower pace wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Your refusal to compete wasn't passiveness, it was peace. Think of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who spoke slowly, softly, and sincerely in a world addicted to speed and noise, yet left a generational impact. That's the kind of presence you had in their life. And now nothing around them carries your frequency. No one else makes them feel safe without demanding their submission. No one else's words leave them thinking for days. No one else's presence silences their inner chaos the way yours did. That absence has become deafening. Isaías 32:17 declares, "The fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever." That's exactly what you brought, quietness and confidence, and now they're starved for it. They thought they were upgrading when they walked away, but what they have now are imitations that drain them. People who wear peace like a costume but can't produce it when life shakes. It's like preferring cubic zirconia over a diamond shiny in the store, but worthless when tested. Consider the Beatles breaking up members, seeking other creative avenues, only to later admit that nothing matched the synergy they had together. Your authenticity has now become a mirror they avoid looking into, because it shows them everything they gave up and everything they've failed to become. John 8:32 reminds us, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But freedom requires facing that truth, and they're not ready. They didn't just lose a person when they lost you. They lost an opportunity to heal, to grow, to be transformed. Now that loss follows them like a shadow, in conversations, in moments of quiet, in their private regrets. They see your kind of authenticity as rare because it is, and deep down, they know counterfeits can't haunt you forever, but the real thing, that stays in your spirit for life. Number 10. Your stillness made them nervous because it had nothing to prove. Chosen one. Have you noticed how your peace can make some people restless? They're used to noise, competition, and the constant need to prove so. When you walked into the room without trying to dominate it, without fighting for attention, it unsettled them. They thought your quiet meant you were weak. They assumed your refusal to argue when misunderstood meant you lacked courage. They mistook your decision not to rush into defending your worth as a sign that you had none. But why should a mountain explain its existence to pebbles? While everyone else was performing, you stayed still. You moved with intention, not impulse. You chose peace over pettiness, and that made them uneasy because they were used to chaos, used to people who over-explain, overcompensate, and overreact. You did none of that, and because the world measures worth by noise, they misread your silence as passivity. What they failed to see was that your stillness wasn't born of fear, it was the fruit of discipline. Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." Your quiet wasn't emptiness, it was maturity. It was the power of knowing you didn't have to shrink yourself to be accepted, nor stretch yourself to be seen. You weren't avoiding confrontation, you were simply rooted in something deeper. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. His quiet, non-violent approach unsettled entire empires. They didn't understand that his stillness was strategy, that his refusal to react in anger was his greatest weapon. Your calm has the same effect. It came from spiritual clarity, not emotional detachment. You had already made peace with who you were, and that peace shook those who had not. They expected you to defend yourself, to react like others did when pushed to fight back, to raise your voice, to play by their script. But you didn't. You let them talk. You let them assume. You let them believe they had the upper hand. And Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." You understood that some battles are beneath your assignment. Think of Serena Williams in her prime. She didn't need to yell to prove her dominance. She let her game speak. Likewise, your silence was never surrender. It was evidence that you had already won in a way they couldn't measure. Now they're realizing they never had the advantage they thought they did. Your stillness has become magnetic. The same presence they once dismissed is now the energy they crave. They find themselves wanting to be near you because your presence quiets the noise in their own soul. Isaías 30:15 declares, "In quietness and trust is your strength." That's exactly what they're feeling. Strength wrapped in peace. They're realizing the real reason you made them nervous wasn't that you lacked something, it was that you didn't need them. You didn't chase. You didn't perform. You didn't fight for a seat at their table because you already knew you carried the feast within you. Oprah Winfrey once said, "You only have power when you are not afraid to lose it." That's the kind of power you embodied. Now they are falling not for a fantasy version of you, not for an image they projected, but for your calm, for the peace that cannot be faked, for the way you carry yourself without forcing the room to notice you. Yet the room feels your presence. Philippians 4:7 says, "The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." That peace is what they feel now, and it's drawing them in. They're falling for what they could not name before, the rare and holy comfort of being near someone who knows exactly who they are, someone who doesn't have to prove, but simply is. And that's the kind of presence that lingers in a person's spirit long after you've left the room. Number 11. You didn't glow up, you grew through. Chosen one. Do you ever feel like people only see your highlight reel and assume it came easy? They look at you now, confident, clear, glowing, and think you just woke up magnetic one day. Have you noticed how quickly they create a fairy tale in their head about your success? They think it was luck. They think it was instant. But if they knew the truth, if they saw the journey behind the glow, would they still speak so casually about it? They didn't see the nights you cried in silence, gripping your own heart like it was shattering in your hands. They didn't witness the inner battles that left you drained before the sun came up. They never knew the parts of yourself you had to bury just to survive the season you were in. How could they? They weren't there for the therapy sessions that cracked you open. They didn't hear the prayers you whispered through clenched teeth. They didn't see the forgiveness you gave to people who never apologized. They didn't watch you lose people who felt like your entire world losses that almost made you lose yourself. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That's where you were, and that's where he met you. So, no. This wasn't a glow up. This was a grow through. You didn't level up by accident. You broke down, got rebuilt, and came back different. You had to unlearn the version of yourself that was built for other people's comfort. You had to strip away the masks and roles you played just to be accepted. Have you ever noticed how people think strength is the absence of pain? They don't realize strength is often born from surviving it. Think of Maya Angelou. Her grace and wisdom felt effortless to those who saw her in her prime. But behind it was a life of trials, silencing, resilience, and rebirth. Your story holds that same arc. You didn't rise for applause. You rose because you had no other choice. You didn't get better to impress them. You got better because you wanted to breathe again without the weight of unhealed wounds crushing your chest. Now, they're falling for the version of you that cost everything to become. They admire your boundaries, your calm, your clarity. They love the way you move with purpose and protect your peace. But here's the question: do they understand the price tag on this version of you? Do they realize it was paid in full with heartbreak? No one comforted you through isolation that taught you to enjoy your own company. And growth nobody clapped for. Isaiah 61:3 promises beauty for ashes. And that's exactly what they're seeing. But they missed the ashes. It's like watching Michelle Obama today and forgetting the years of discipline, sacrifice, and relentless self-work that shaped her into who she is. People love the finished product, but they disappear during the process. They want the shine, but not the shaping. And now, they don't quite know how to reach you anymore. Not because you've grown arrogant or cold, but because you've elevated. You're operating on a frequency where games, drama, and shallow connections simply cannot survive. Philippians 3:14-16. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward. You've gone upward, and the air is different here. They feel it, the gap, the tension, the regret. Because the old you would have chased, the old you would have explained yourself, the old you would have over-accommodated, but that version no longer exists. Can you imagine an Olympic athlete running backward to accommodate someone who never trained? That's what it would be like for you to go back now. You didn't change to be loved. You changed because you finally loved yourself. And self-love taught you that some rooms aren't worth entering. Some people aren't worth convincing. And some versions of you were never meant to last. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone. The new is here. Then, now they're realizing they never really knew you. They only knew the version of you that hadn't healed yet, the one who hadn't yet discovered their worth. And here's the truth: they're falling for you now. But they can't meet you at this altitude without doing their own work. Deep down, they know it. And you've learned that not everyone who admires the view is ready for the climb. Number 12. They couldn't handle your humility because it exposed their insecurity. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why humility can make some people more uncomfortable than arrogance? You showed up without pretense. You listened more than you spoke. You didn't fight to take the spotlight or snatch credit. You weren't trying to outshine anyone. You stayed consistent, calm, and steady. And somehow, that bothered them more than if you had been loud, aggressive, and demanding. Why? Because true humility carries a weight their ego can't lift. They couldn't handle your humility, not because it made you less, but because it made them feel their own lack. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. Your grace was a mirror they didn't want to look into. Your kindness felt suspicious to people who only operate through competition and control. They didn't know how to receive it because they're used to relationships built on rivalry, one-upmanship, and constant proving. Think about Mr. Rogers never raising his voice, never seeking to dominate a room, yet leaving a greater legacy than countless louder personalities. That's what your presence did. It unsettled them because it revealed that real influence doesn't need volume, it needs authenticity. They wanted someone to rival. They wanted someone who would take the bait and play the ego-driven games they thrive on. But you refused. You didn't try to prove that you were better, smarter, or more deserving. You just kept showing up as yourself, focused, grounded. Unshaken. Proverbs 22. 4 reminds us. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. That's the kind of reward you were quietly building while they wasted their energy on performance. Your humility confused them. How could someone who didn't force themselves into the center still carry such presence? How could someone who wasn't loud still be heard? They misjudged you as soft, passive, easy to ignore. They laughed at your kindness and mistook your silence for weakness. But time is proving what their ego never could. That consistency will outlast charisma every time. Consider Tim Duncan, the NBA legend known as the Big Fundamental. No flashy style, no constant trash talk, just discipline, skill, and quiet leadership. Many underestimated him, but his career outlasted nearly everyone who once overshadowed him. That's you. You didn't need to flex, you just needed to remain steady. And now you're outpacing and outlasting those who once tried to outmaneuver you. You're walking through doors they tried to block. You're rising without stepping on anyone's back. James 4:10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." And that's exactly what's happening. They're watching you be elevated in ways they can't explain, and in silence, they're taking notes. Now the same people who mocked your humility are trying to copy your energy. They're practicing the same calm they once rolled their eyes at. They're trying to move like you, talk like you, and channel the peace they once dismissed, because what they called weak turned out to be unshakable. It's the same irony we saw with Abraham Lincoln, mocked early in his career for being too gentle in politics, yet remembered as one of history's most resolute leaders. Your humility didn't just expose their insecurity, it revealed your strength. 1 Peter 5-6 tells us, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time." You didn't fight for validation, you trusted God's timing, and now your shine isn't loud, but it's undeniable. You're not competing, you're not clapping back, you're not plotting revenge, yet your influence is spreading farther than their noise ever did. And that's the part they can't unsee, that the very posture they mocked was the foundation of the strength they can't replicate. Number 13. They projected their past onto you now. Your purity makes them question their whole pattern. Chosen one. Have you ever met someone who treated you like a crime scene before you even said a word? That's what happened here. They didn't give you a fair chance, not because you did anything wrong, but because they were still bleeding from wounds you didn't cause. You walked in carrying light, but to them, that light looked like a trick. Why? Because you reminded them of someone from their past, someone who lied, betrayed, abandoned, or broke them. And instead of healing from that, they handed you the punishment for crimes you didn't commit. They saw your love and assumed it was a trap. They saw your consistency and labeled it fake. Isaiah 5:20 warns, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." That's exactly what they did, mislabeling your purity because they were used to poison. They approached you with suspicion, not because of who you were, but because of who had hurt them before. They projected their pain onto your peace, their fear onto your faith, their chaos onto your calm. Your kindness made them anxious, Your honesty made them uncomfortable. It's like when people first encountered Mr. Rogers, some assumed his sincerity was an act because they had never seen gentleness without an agenda. They were so used to manipulation that truth felt threatening. They told themselves, "No one can be this real. There must be a hidden motive." And so they treated you like a villain before you even had the chance to be real. They tested you. They sabotaged the connection. They stirred up drama that didn't exist just to confirm the false narrative they'd already decided on. But here's the thing, Luke 6:45 says, "Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks." Their accusations said more about them than about you. Time, however, has a way of revealing what fear can't hide. You're still standing. You didn't retaliate. You didn't manipulate. You didn't twist the knife when you could have. Instead, you loved with an open hand. And when it was clear they couldn't receive it, you let go with grace. That's the kind of strength we see in Michelle Obama, enduring insults without compromising dignity, always rising above the noise. Now they're watching you from a distance, confused and unsettled, because you were everything they claimed. They wanted loyalty, honesty, peace, but when it came without a catch, they couldn't accept it. Your purity is now a mirror in their life. It's forcing them to ask themselves hard questions. Why do I push away what's good for me? Why do I trust chaos more than calm? Why does peace make me suspicious? The truth is, you were never the problem. Their unhealed trauma was. Hebrews 12:15 warns, "See to it that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." That bitter root twisted their view of you from the start. Every gentle thing you did is echoing in their mind now. Every honest word you spoke is replaying in their memory. Every moment you showed up with no strings attached stands in stark contrast to the games they're still surrounded by. They're not haunted because they're ready to receive you. Now they're haunted because they finally see how much they ruined something they didn't understand. Think of Vincent van Gogh, misunderstood and dismissed while alive. His art only appreciated after it was too late. That's you. They didn't recognize the value when they had access. Now, they see it everywhere they look. You didn't remind them of the person who hurt them. You reminded them of what love should feel like. And that's the part they can't shake. 1 John 4:18 says, "Perfect love drives out fear." But they weren't ready for perfect love. They only knew love with conditions, with control, with fear woven through it. Now they live with the knowledge that the one they pushed away was the one with no hidden motives. No traps, no games. Just a pure heart they weren't prepared to handle. And purity like that doesn't fade from memory. It becomes the standard by which everything else is measured, and nothing else comes close. Number 14. They judged your scars. Not knowing you were bleeding for a generation, chosen one. Have you noticed how quickly people confuse scars with shame? They looked at the lines life carved into you and decided you were damaged goods. They saw the pain flicker in your eyes, the weight in your shoulders, the slight cracks in your voice, and wrote you off. In their minds, you were too broken to lead, too flawed to shine, too wounded to be trusted with anything important. But tell me, since when has God required perfection before using someone? They didn't understand that your scars weren't signs of defeat. They were holy records. Isaiah 53:5 says, "By his wounds we are healed." Wounds can be proof of power, and yours are divine documentation of everything you've survived. What looked like damage was actually evidence of your assignment. They judged you because they were trained to admire polish, not purpose. And because your journey didn't come with the clean packaging of a perfect story, they dismissed it without looking deeper. While they were busy measuring your worth by how put together you appeared, heaven was measuring you by how faithful you remained while falling apart. Your pain was producing healing for others. Your story was becoming a chain breaker. Your transparency was setting people free from their own cages. Think of Nelson Mandela, branded as a criminal and locked away for decades, only to emerge as the leader who would heal a nation. People were changed, not by his perfection, but by the depth of his perseverance. The same is happening with you. The voice they mocked is now the voice comforting the broken. The presence they ignored is now being requested in rooms they can't enter. The story they once rolled their eyes at is now the map guiding others out of darkness. Revelation 12:11 says, "They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Your testimony is becoming a lifeline. You didn't just survive. You transfigured your pain into purpose. Your wounds became windows. Your hurt became help. Your journey became proof that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. Consider Bethany Hamilton, the surfer who lost her arm to a shark attack, yet returned to compete. Her scars didn't disqualify her. They amplified her influence. Likewise, the very marks they ridiculed have become the marks of your authority. Now they're falling for your resilience, for your fire wrapped in softness, for the way you can carry deep wounds without letting bitterness spill out. Your scars were never weakness, they were proof of your assignment. You were never bleeding just for yourself. You were bleeding so others could live. 2 Corinthians 1-4 says God comforts us in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive. That's exactly what you've been doing, even when no one was applauding. And the most humbling part, you never needed their validation to rise. You just needed time for your scars to start speaking. And now, they speak louder than any defense you could have given. What they thought was the end of your story was just the refining chapter. Genesis 50-20 echoes in your life. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, the saving of many lives. No, they thought they had you figured out, labeled, judged, dismissed, filed away. But you weren't just a moment, you were a movement in the making. The same stillness they mocked is now the peace they crave. The same depth they feared is now the connection they seek. The same story they ridiculed is now the story healing others. While they chased illusions, you became substance. While they faked perfection, you forged authenticity. While they hid their wounds, you healed from yours. And now, as they sought through the ashes of their illusions, you are rising in the fire of your calling, undeniable, untouchable, unapologetically whole. Think of Malala Yousafzai, attacked and left for dead for speaking truth, yet rising to become a global voice for education. That's what your journey represents, a living witness that scars don't end stories, they empower them. You weren't the problem, you were the lesson. And now they finally understand why it hurts so much to lose you. Your presence marked them. Your energy convicted them. Your truth revealed them. You didn't come to impress. You came to impact. And you did. So let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them fall for what they once feared. You are not bitter. You are better. You are not chasing apologies. You are walking in purpose. Because chosen one, your scars don't just tell your story. They carry the survival of a generation. Chosen ones. If you've walked with me through this entire message, you already know this wasn't just a collection of stories. It was a mirror, a reminder, a prophetic confirmation that your journey with all its valleys and mountaintops, was never random. Every misunderstanding, every false judgment, every silent season, every scar, it was all part of a blueprint only heaven could design. Think about everything we've unpacked together. How many times were you misread, underestimated, or overlooked only for God to turn that very thing into the reason you stand unshakable today? How many people treated you like a chapter they could skip, only to discover you were the part of the story that held the answer they'd been looking for? That's not just life, that's divine orchestration. That's the fingerprint of the one who called you before the foundation of the world. So when I say this, I mean it with all sincerity. If this message hit your spirit, don't just scroll past. This isn't just entertainment. This is God sending confirmation straight into your path. You didn't stumble here, you were drawn here. Your spirit recognized something your mind has been trying to put into words for years. And when God gives you revelation, it's not meant to sit in the corner of your heart collecting dust. Revelation isn't meant to be kept, it's meant to be passed on. Somebody in your life is one word away from giving up. Somebody you know is one confirmation away from choosing faith over fear. And maybe you're the one God is counting on to get this word to them. That's why I'm asking you to share this. Send it to the friend who's been questioning their worth, to the family member who thinks they're too broken to be used, to the co-worker who smiles every day but is fighting silent battles. This isn't just a channel, this is a movement. And if you're here, you're part of it. We are a tribe of people who know what it's like to be refined in the fire, to be hidden in the wilderness, to be counted out and then called forth. We've been broken, but never destroyed, pressed, but never crushed. We're proof that God still uses the underestimated to shake the nations. And let me take a moment to speak from my heart. Thank you to every single one of you who has watched, commented, shared, prayed, and yes, even donated through the super thanks button. You have no idea how much you're helping keep this message alive and reaching more people. Your generosity doesn't just support me, it fuels the mission. It keeps this voice speaking into the lives of people you may never meet, but whose destinies are being altered because you helped keep the light on. But I also want to say this loud and clear, whether you donate or not. I am deeply, truly grateful for you. Your presence here matters. Your engagement matters. Your prayers matter. If all you can give is your time, your attention, and your willingness to share this message that is priceless in the kingdom of God. Now, let's get practical for a moment. If you feel led to sow into this mission, whether it's $1 or $100, click that super thanks button below. Not because you're paying for a blessing, but because you're partnering in planting seeds that will bear fruit in lives far beyond your own. But if your season right now is one where you're holding on tight to every penny, keep it. God's blessing over you is not for sale. You are loved, valued, and honored here. Regardless, as we close this chapter, I want to remind you of something the enemy hopes you'll forget. You are not defined by who walked away, what they said, or how they judged you. You are defined by the God who wrote your name into his book before time began. You're defined by the blood that covered you, the spirit that sustains you, and the purpose that keeps pulling you forward even when life tries to drag you back. You've heard me say it before, but I'll say it again. This world will misread you, misunderstand you, and mislabel you. They'll judge your scars, your stillness, your humility, your healing process. But every time they get it wrong, heaven gets it right. And in the end, the truth will always speak louder than the lie. So here's my blessing over you. I bless your mind with peace that cannot be shaken by gossip, opinion, or misunderstanding. I bless your heart with courage to keep loving, even after betrayal. I bless your hands to prosper in everything God has called you to build. I bless your feet to walk into rooms no one thought you'd enter, carrying authority no one can deny. And I bless your spirit to stay aligned with heaven, so no matter what storms rise, you will not be moved. Chosen one, this is your season to rise without explaining yourself, to shine without asking permission, and to keep walking even when the ones who misjudged you are now watching from the sidelines. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them wish. You don't owe them a performance. You owe God your obedience before you leave. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with, "I'm part of the movement, so I know you're standing with me in this." If you felt God confirm something in you through this message, write it down in the comments, because your testimony might be the key someone else needs to unlock their faith. We're not here to play small. We're here to take territory. And every time you share this, every time you speak life into someone else, every time you choose faith over fear, you're part of this mission. So, to my tribe, thank you for showing up. Thank you for choosing truth in a time when lies are louder. Thank you for believing in what God is doing here. We are just getting started. The best chapters are still ahead. Stay connected. Stay aligned. Stay unshakable. And as always, God bless you. May His face shine upon you, His favor surround you, and His peace guard your heart in Christ Jesus.